Okay, guys, back again. We're reading from Gods of the Bible. We're still on chapter 9. We've already, chapter 10. Take that back. The topic is drug addicted gods, sacred materialism, Holocaust, Noah, Moses, Cain and Abel. Hold on. Burnt scent, consequences of preparing the wrong mixture. And now we're going to start on page 193. Space smells like fried steak. Okay. Traditional explanations fail to provide answers to the questions above. A spiritual God is not compatible with the behavior described, nor can it be said that Yahweh acted cruelly to conform to the barbaric customs of uncivilized people. The norms and rules that Yahweh established during his years in the desert to educate the Israelites reveal that they were well aware of ethical and moral values for civil coexistence. These ritual instructions for preparing and implementing Holocaust sacrifices and offerings had only meaning for the Elohim who wanted to smell those distinct odors. But why did the Elohim have to smell the smoke of burnt meat and certain spice mixtures? Some hints come from NASA, the American Space Agency, with enough experience in space flight to provide unexpected information. NASA astronauts participating in spacewalks report a puzzling fact. While taking off their spacesuits after returning from a spacewalk, they could perceive a typical aroma of grilled meat and the specific smell of heated iron. On September 18, 2006, Anoshe Ansari, a wealthy Iranian-American businesswoman participating in an 8-day expedition to the International Space Station as a tourist, Expedition 14 of the Soyuz TMA-9, reported on her blog that she smelled something resembling the stench of burnt almond cookies. Remember the smell of galbanum and ancha? So space travelers experience distinct olfactory senses so pungent and strong that NASA included them in its training program. Stephen Pearce, chemist director of the British perfume company Omega Ingredients, declared that NASA asked him to develop a perfume to reproduce the typical space smell. Pearce said it was easy to reproduce the smell of grilled meat, but it was more challenging to produce the odor of heated metal. In any case, his fragrance adds a touch of realism to space training. Trainees are made to smell it when they put on their suits to be immersed in large pools in which the absence of gravity is simulated. The astronauts thus get used to smelling what they will find in space. Telegraph.co.uk reported the news in 2008. NASA has commissioned Stephen Pearce, a chemist and managing director of the fragrance manufacturing company Omega Ingredients, to recreate the smell of space in a laboratory. His research will be used to help astronauts prepare for the conditions they will encounter in space. Mr. Pearce began working for NASA in August and hopes to have recreated the smell of space by the end of the year. He said, "I did some work for an art exhibit in July, which was based entirely on smell and one of the things I created was the smell of the inside of the Mir space station. NASA heard about it and contacted me to see if I could help them recreate the smell of space to help their astronauts. We have few clues as to what space smells like. First of all, there were interviews with the astronauts that we were given when they had been outside and then returned to the space station and were desuiting and taking off their helmets. They all reported quite particular odors. For them, what comes across is a smell of fried steak, hot metal, and even welding a motorbike, one of them said. The suggestion to us has been that it's about creating realism for their training. So they train the astronauts in their suits by putting them in big water tanks to simulate the loss of gravity. And so it's just about making sure the whole thing is a realistic training exercise. We have already produced the smell of fried steak, but not hot metal is proving more difficult. We think it's a high energy vibration in the molecule, and that's what they're trying to add to it now. Mr. Pierce visited Moorside High School in Manchester today to discuss the project as part of the Manchester Science Festival. The explanation for this smell lies in a well-known phenomenon. In space, cell renewal of the superficial layers of the epidermis increases. Thus, the number of dead cells increases too. When astronauts put on their suits to work outdoors, these smells are detached by the friction effect that are shed again when the spacesuit is removed inside the spacecraft. In contrast, the oxygen-rich artificial atmosphere inside the space vehicle, the dead cells undergo a very rapid oxidation process that produces a strong smell of burnt flesh. Is this the astronauts who stink, not space? Is it the astronauts who stink, not space? Let us now return to the Bible. Subtopic, the next one is the role of opioid peptides. If the Elohim are individuals from outer space, how often did they smell this particular odor? Was it familiar to them? Did it relax them? Or did they perhaps want to mask the stench emanating from their skin, which they did not wish anyone who encountered them to notice? Moreover, what is the composition of the substances released by these fumes? Can chemistry come to our help? The combustion of the fat and protein chains composed of different amino acids present in the fat and flesh of the victims produces substances whose chemical structure is reminiscent of opioid peptides, similar to the effects of endorphins. Endorphins, peptides produced by the human body, can cause pain relief, sedation, including respiration, blunting of neurosensory abilities, apathy, and lethargy. They can also stimulate appetite and thirst, promote the release of growth hormones, regulate the production of thyroid and sex hormones, have anti-inflammatory effects, and improve overall mood. Opioid peptides can be absorbed through the gastrointestinal tract, nasal mucosa, and respiratory tract. Most importantly, these substances are addictive, so repeating and increasing their intake is necessary to achieve the same result. effect. The opioids par excellence are morphine and heroin, which have a structure similar to the endorphins naturally produced by human physiology. Moreover, there is a substantial infinity between the chemical composition of the substances produced by the combustion of fat and animal proteins and the substances derived above, indigenous opioid peptides and opioids. We can therefore hypothesize that morphine-like components of the Ketoret burnt offerings could be responsible for the calming effect on the Elohim and the need for so-called God to have large quantities of this product available. In short, the Nehosh of the Bible, which, as mentioned, induces a condition of relaxation, finds here a possible neurophysiological explanation. We express sheer hypotheses. However, it is with hypotheses that we must proceed when we are met with ancient texts that tell us of such concrete events and situations. The Bible repeatedly describes the strange olfactory pleasure caused by the smell generated by the combustion of animal proteins and fat of sacrificial victims. These effects may be due to the stimulation of particular systems connected with endorphins and other possible chemical neurotransmitters that interact with the neurophysiological of a human-like living being. As for the vegetable ingredients and shellfish used in the sacrifices, their antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties, which promote lung function, justify their use to improve the environmental conditions to which the Elohim are exposed during their encounters with humans. The complex ritual involving washing and cleaning the body of those who had come into contact with the so-called divinities might confirm this reading. Did the procedure serve to prevent possible contamination causes? Okay, we're at the conclusions. We have formulated hypotheses whose hard evidence has yet to be available. Still, the questions and the possible answers we have provided in this chapter might help scholars to overcome the contradictions of the traditional exegesis, which claim, for example, that everything in the Bible teaches about offerings and sacrifices is central to salvation history and supposedly help us to recognize and understand the Lord's mercy. According to famous theologian and Bible scholar Gianni Franco Rassi, sacrifices, animal or vegetable, embody the same believer offspring himself to God to establish a bond of communication with it. What about Cain's offering then? What about the two sons of Aaron? We must never assume to have the truth until it is proved beyond doubt. However, as we have seen, the poor Israelites who would dare to imitate the Elohim and sniff some of the same odors was to be put to death. Thus, it is not easy to dismiss the alien reading as fanciful or crazy, because unlike the theological reading, it has the advantage of adhering to biblical text. In contrast, the theological elaborations do not agree with what the stories tell, even if they do not contradict them completely. It is no accident that even the most attentive Catholic commentators feel compelled to admit that specific passages of the Torah, and Leviticus in particular, which we have quoted at length in this chapter, contain risky concepts since they can eventually destroy the value of the story in which God reveals himself. No wonder religious orthodoxy considers this concreteness risky. The term kadosh, usually translated as sacred, as we have pointed out many times, literally means set apart, set aside, destined for, and also prepared for a task, for a function. There is a tangible and concrete meaning behind the concept of sacred that transpires and emerges from those stories and in Yahweh's behaviors and goals. This concreteness seems to be the fundamental, if not the only, element that interests Yahweh in the Bible. Anything jeopardizing Yahweh's goals was considered useless and harmful and could get one killed. In summary, Yahweh had substances made for him that were reserved only for him, and that he had to sniff, to reach a state of relaxation and tranquility. The vapors thus produced and regulated his breathing and had a sterilizing effect in the rooms or location that he used when he wanted to meet with his representatives. These are all extremely practical and easily understandable goals, also considering the hygienic conditions of the time, which were decidedly risky for Yahweh. Wow. It is not what I thought it was, guys. So, this God, the Most High, demanded these certain sacrifices of certain spices and fatty parts and herbs that we now know have antimicrobial, antibacterial, to alter states of mind, I guess. And he wasn't interested in any other sacrifices, only specific ones that had to be done in a specific way at a specific location. And if you got it wrong, your ass got killed. And it was only for Yahweh. Don't you smell my stuff? The Most High needed to get a little bit high, and needed these extra herbs to protect him from the cooties of the sacrificers. Does that sound like the creator of the cosmos to you? Not to me. Wow. All right, we're going to stop here, and we're going to start on page 199, The Messengers of God. All right, I'll see you guys next time.